Hello, my name is Cody Hall, and I'm the host of The Faces. Entrepreneurs are people too. And today I'm welcoming Chuck, an Army veteran and founder of 1310 Business Solutions. Chuck has built a career turning failures into fuel and leadership into impact. Join us and discover how discipline, purpose, and people-first leadership can transform not just your business, but your life. Chuck, how are you doing today?
Hey, Cody, doing well. How are you?
Oh man, I'm super excited for our podcast today. We just had a huge earthquake here in Mexico. So I'm glad that hopefully fingers crossed, the Wi-Fi holds out. It went down for a second.
Yeah, that has a way of interrupting life, doesn't it?
It's a little different. I am hurricanes, tornadoes. I've experienced it. It's something about the earth moving underneath you that just is very unsettling as a human.
It's been a few years since I experienced that, but yes, I agree.
Well, I mean, recently we had one where it was a hurricane and the earth was shaking at the same time. So as long as that doesn't take place through the course of this podcast, we should be able to make it through, sir. So I appreciate you joining me. And I really want to rabbit hole, as I enjoy doing. But before I do that, I'd like to give you a moment to tell us who's Chuck, kind of like who we're chatting with here today.
Yeah, uh, my name's Chuck Knabusch. I founded 1310 Business Solutions back in 2019 after a year of being retired. My wife said, find a hobby, find a job. A job paid better. And it actually worked out perfect because my former employer, Lazy Boy, had been there 28 years before I retired. They called and said, hey, would you come back for a project? And I did. COVID hit. They said, we got to let you go. I said, no problem. I understand. I know how it works after being there 28 years. 3 months later, they called again and said, would you open up a couple of plants for us in Mexico? I said, absolutely. They said, we've got the biggest level of back orders that we've ever had in our history. And realistically, our U.S. plants can't handle anymore. And, whether it's getting the personnel from the community or just any more production. So they said, we want to do some stuff down in Mexico. I said, great. So I commuted for 15, 18 months to Mexico during COVID to open up 2 manufacturing plants. Prior to my career with Lazy Boy, I spent 7 years active duty in the U.S. Army and 2 years in the Michigan Army National Guard. Um, Prior to that, I flunked out of college. I was the salutatorian of my high school, so you'd think I was right there and ready to go. And my first year at University of Michigan, at the end of the year, I got a nice letter that said, please don't return. Went on to a community college, and my grades weren't marginally better. So I decided not to return, which is why I went into the Army. Since then, I've ended up getting a couple of degrees, but realistically, I needed that failure to tell me I needed discipline.
No, I actually was going to wrestle in college. I had scholarships to wrestle in college. And I was like, I went to the summer camp for wrestling. I'm like, man, they're just hazing me here. I don't want to get hazed. So I joined the Marine Corps
Yeah.
because that was a lapse in logic. So I really didn't think that one through. I'm like, I want to be respected. So I went to the Marine Corps.
Well, and I'm sure, a lot of people on your podcast, they talk about successes, but, I wanted to also mention, a failure because it's from the failure that you go ahead, build resilience. It's how you get back up. It's how you go ahead and keep going. And I think that's an important part of success because we all look back fondly and can talk about all of our high points. But we
Right.
don't always want to go ahead and have those conversations about those failures. And a real neat guy I know down in Mexico, um, he was part of what I guess we would call here in the States a Chamber of Commerce. And they have what they call failure nights that they get together, I don't know, once a month or every other week and talk about the failures that they've had and the lessons that they learned from them and how to go ahead and go on. And that kind of always stuck with me. And I thought, what a phenomenal concept.
I mean, you learn so much more from failure, right, than you do success. And I tell my team every day, fail quickly, right? So, stop trying to measure 10 times and just, measure twice and execute, measure twice and execute. And
Right.
so that way I call it the Elon Musk way of rockets, right? Let's blow up some rockets. Like, let's figure out where the fail points are. Because that's the
Uh,
quickest way to get past theoretical and into reality. And I'm sure you experience that quite frequently. So a lot of time in Mexico, we're all about, because I live in Mexico as well, we're all about getting at it.
yeah, I mean, I've in some of the people that I've met and worked with down in Mexico, some of their culture seems to come out that they don't want to be embarrassed. They want to go ahead and
Correct.
strive for perfection, and I can appreciate that absolutely. But when we were setting up plants, we knew we weren't going to do everything perfect because it's not. Even if we had had a book that detailed everything out, I mean, everything's always a little bit different. Um, and we would make mistakes, but it's like, okay, well, we need to put something back in. And they'd want to go ahead, plan it out for perfect. It's like, no, we need to go ahead and lock it in and get moving. And we can go ahead, tweak from there. So, I mean, that was kind of one of the lessons that they had to learn, but I got a chance to go ahead and live and work in a slightly different culture and got some insights that taught me some things too.
So I have call centers all across Mexico. And I'm interested in where were the plants located? Because my wife, where she's from, is a huge furniture production part of Mexico. So I'm curious what cities and areas the plants were in.
Yeah, one was just outside of Monterey by an hour and a half, Sotillo,
Okay.
and the other one was San Luis Rio, Colorado, just across the
Okay.
border from Arizona.
That's cool. Yeah. My wife's where she grew up, they had like 3 or 4 IKEA plants, production plants. And so they're just pumping out furniture all the time. Everyone in her city where she grew up, they're either in the mafia or they make furniture. So, sometimes both. And so
You never know.
it depends. But it's interesting because when I would go around and set up all my call centers, which now it's been over the course of 20 years, I'm always pushing people to the start line. And they're like, and eventually I get to the point where we get everything on the board. I was like, hey, listen, this is the launch day, right? Doesn't matter what's going on that day. I don't know. I don't care if we have hamster wheels out back powering the whole facility, right? We're going to be live. And so, because you have to otherwise they'll just see it's like, oh, we're not going to be ready. We're not going to be ready. We're not going to be ready. And I'm like, we're going to bolt on the wings as we're taking off. So let's do this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer in you need to kind of start with an end date in mind, start with a timeline,
Correct.
because otherwise your plan is just a dream that never happens. So you need to have that date. And come hell or high water, you need to go ahead and hit that date and find a way to make it happen. And it never ceases to surprise me the way people can step up and do
Right.
that when they know that that's a firm date, that that date isn't going to get pushed or that this is not a project that, well, we can keep pushing the date out every week, every month for 3, 4, 5, 6 times.
Well, it takes a lot to get these, and talk about specifically in regards to commitment to the execution of a mission, right? We're talking about getting the plants up, right? Which, that is a challenge. Me, for many years, and my family, and then my team, we would move around to these places where we were launching these call centers. I've lived all across Mexico, Guadalajara, Monterrey, Ciudad de Mexico, because I moved there because launching a large center wasn't easy. I had to be there every day, and I didn't want to fly and not see my family. I was bringing in staff who specialize in getting it off the ground, who are my cultural whisperers, right? Like, let's get this going. And so it took a lot of effort. And so, kudos to you. Do you speak Spanish as well?
And no.
No. Oh, wow. How did that
No,
go?
not at all, and I was very fortunate that the team that we worked with, I mean, they were all English speaking, they
Yeah.
may not have been, um, as proficient as they would like, but they were far more proficient in English than I was in Spanish, and I would constantly remind them of that, "Hey, look, there's a lot of things that I may do right, but one of them is not speaking Spanish. You're doing phenomenal in Spanish, and as long as you're willing to go ahead and try the English, w we'll find a way, we'll make it work." But, the
I
nice
love
thing
it.
too is with translators and stuff like that, that we can carry on our phone that you didn't have 10, 15 years ago.
Correct. I mean, I used to always make the joke with some of my staff when we were doing things is like together we're bilingual, their English and my Spanish together we'll understand each other.
I love that.
Well, it's good, and I tell that to people, we're at Telehub and we staff only bilingual people, but I do enjoy when we're able to, and it just had this happen just last week. We had a gentleman hire a new virtual assistant, and I had no clue this guy spoke fluent Spanish. And for those listening, he didn't just speak Spanish, like he spoke Mexican Spanish, right? It wasn't Spanish that from Spain or from a classroom. And I was like, man, I'm like, where did you learn Spanish? And when were you going to tell me you spoke Spanish? He's like, oh, well, my mom's Mexican. My grandparents are all Mexican. I picked it up. And so I'm like, yeah, you speak really good Spanish. And so people will surprise you left and right. But those tools, being bilingual with a team, sometimes that's as good as we can get. That's all I can hope for
Oh,
some days.
oh, absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about 1310, right? What's the name mean and what is it doing now, not besides launching these centers when you did that?
Well, I mean, what everybody always looks for a really cool name. And when you work kind of in the operations area and you focus on leadership planning, execution things, you want like performance or you want, something like that. But as I started looking around, a lot of those names were taken sometimes multiple times over. I'd seen a name someplace where it was a number, partly in written word, partly in a numeric. And I kind of like that. So 1310 is actually my address.
Chuck, I love it.
Well, you
I
know what?
thought maybe
You,
I thought maybe it was going to be something like, we have this saying in the recon community, 25 and 5, right?
yeah,
And so 25 plus the 5 to make 30.
right.
I was thinking something was going to come up 1310.
But, since 2019, there's been fewer than 10 people who asked.
Yeah.
Because either some people said, "Oh man, it must mean something," and I just don't understand what that deeper meaning is, and they were scared to ask, or maybe some people were just less than curious. But I've had less than 10 people ask me over the course of my existence as 1310.
No, I love that. I ask a lot of questions. Far be the day where I thought any question was stupid. It was something that plagued me in the military because I was always asking questions. And for those out there who weren't in the military, sometimes asking questions identifies that you don't know what the heck you're talking about, right? Or like in the military, they call it being stupid, right? And
Right.
so they're not known for their culture, the military. So give them a break now. So when you ask questions, you're like, well, apparently Cody doesn't know what's going on. So, but I was always the person like, hey, what are we doing this for? Why are we doing this? Oftentimes the answer was because it's how we've always done it. I love the address thing. That's I just went with telehelp because I wanted telephone based help. Right? It's crazy. It's a
Mm.
crazy idea. What is 13 and 10 do? So talking about operational, like who is your type of client? Talk about revenue and size.
In a perfect world, I'm always looking to find that little bitty niche, which is manufacturing firms, what I call small to mid-size. And I hate when people kind of ask what numbers, but it's got to be generally more than a solopreneur, but you know, less than a huge corporation. Not that I can't help them to, but I'm thinking, it's those small to mid-sized companies they're struggling a little bit. They don't have $100,000 and 10 people to throw at a problem.
Mm,
So I like to take, my background, my knowledge, my experience in that kind of world and say, look, there's a lot of solutions out there, and some of them are free or near free. Why don't we go ahead and explore those as maybe your first step? I mean, there's always ways to throw money at things. There's always an app for that. There's always
yeah.
systems that can go ahead and be created. But the best system to me is starting out with a manual process and a whiteboard. And then let's go ahead and see if it works, play with it a little bit, tweak it, improve it. And then we can go ahead and look at if automation is necessary or not.
I love it. I miss whiteboards. And so I used to run a fairly large healthcare company. And I used to have 3 whiteboards in my office at all times because you always needed one was getting erased and one you're trying to save, and then one was still in the process. And I miss I tried now to use the whiteboard on my desktop when I'm chatting with my team virtually doesn't have the same squeaky sound that I'm looking
Yeah,
for, or the dramaticness of erasing a board when you want to start over. But I do love the whiteboard approach to things, and I agree. You know, and my ignorance there in terms of when you ask a company what size you are, in terms of revenue, I have no particular understanding of what would be a medium size or a small size manufacturing company in terms of revenue. But I go and I speak at conferences all the time, and I recently spoke at a home service business conference in Spanish. Funny enough, and an average size business there was 500K to a million. Like that was the
right,
top of the bell curve, right? And I was talking about when I ran my healthcare company, which is 75 million, and then telehelping, we do well, right? But we're considered a nobody in the
right.
call center and virtual staff. We're literally insignificant. And so in terms of our size, however, we're larger than every painting business that was at that conference, right? And so that's something that is interesting. So give me an idea. What is, I'm curious, what is a small manufacturing, and if they are small, what are they manufacturing?
I mean, there's tons of companies out there. I mean, they can be making wire harnesses for somebody. They can go ahead and be making
Okay,
educational furniture. They, you know,
cool.
I hate. I mean, I love that marketing people are out there because I'm not a sales and marketing type of guy. But that they want to go ahead, quantify, categorize, and all that. But realistically, I'm more interested in what's your problem. Let's have the conversation about the problem, no matter how big or how small you are, and let's go ahead and help you find a solution to it. Um, I know my marketing team are constantly saying, Chuck, well, how from what size to what size? Well, okay, you know, we can go ahead and throw some numbers out there, but I don't know if those numbers are really meaningful or not.
Yeah,
I know, generally I can work with a solopreneur, but I'm looking for somebody who they've started to scale. They've started to go ahead and provide other people, hey, I need you to do this task or that task. And there's somehow that task is still not getting done, or they're having to make all the decisions from it. Um, but I've seen that same thing in a small company scaling as I've seen in a very large company where, a new leader comes in and, well, maybe it's a junior leader. They're not quite sure. This is their first leadership role. They're not quite sure what to go ahead and do. But I've also seen bigger companies who've been around a while where the vice president of operations is moving materials from point A to point B. And that's kind of how I met one of them. And I asked, well, you know, why'd you move the materials? He said, well, because they needed it. Great reason, stupid question. So, but I said, what are you going to do after this? Well, I'm going to see if anybody else needs materials and go ahead and deliver it. So that got me into the conversation. Well, don't you have a materials movement team, a materials handling team? Well, yeah. Well, wouldn't you think as a leader, you'd want to go ahead and have the conversation as to what prevented that team from doing their job? Um, I mean, I'm all for a leader pitching in at any time,
of
but
course.
when you start doing that, can you imagine that whatever product that they were making at that moment, that was going to have the most expensive, the greatest variance in the cost of material handling to have a vice president of operations helping to go ahead and move the materials if they actually started looking at actual cost? Isn't there something of higher value that this individual could be doing? Well, like fixing the problem, like preventing that problem from ever occurring ever again. So,
Wow.
and that's where I love to go ahead and work and talk with leaders and say, well, hey, I love that you lent a hand. I think that shows that you're leading from the front. But on the other hand, if you're not asking the questions after the fact to prevent that problem, then you're just defaulting to be a worker. And I think you're being paid to go ahead and for far more value than that.
That's one of my favorite conversations. That is as a the and it's a really wise conversation to have as a coach and as a leader who's held multiple roles. I had the conversation at large with my wife from the time we started one of our restaurants to now all of our restaurants that she operates. And there will be times where, insert Cody, I would just show up at the restaurant for lunch one day and I'd see my wife doing something. And she was there and she likes to do things. She's a doer, right? Loves
Right.
doing things, right? And I would say, I like walk over to him, like, hey, I'm like, if you're doing this, who's managing this?
Right.
Right. And I said, never do what a waiter can do because a waiter can't do what Paulina can do. Right. And so Paulina needs to be looking and assessing how things are going, identifying bottlenecks and problems, correcting the process, fixing the system, right? And this making sure all these instruments, you're the conductor, right? You're trying to conduct. Now, sometimes you have to go talk over to the drums. You have a conversation with the drums to figure out what's happening with the
Right.
drums,
Well,
right?
and
But
Cody,
you're
I
not
see
going to
the problem
become the
even
drummer.
deeper than that.
Yeah.
Because I see in the case of Paulina that she's not setting the example, or the example that she is setting, that maybe that waiter does want to go ahead and move up into her position at some point in time. You'll open up a new restaurant. He might get the chance to go ahead and be the Paulina of that restaurant. Well, but he's being taught to go ahead and default into waiting duties rather than to
Right.
default into management
Very
duties,
much
into
so.
leadership duties, into seeing the big picture. Uh, and we need examples of that too, because it's real easy to go ahead and find people who micromanage left, right, up, down. But it's
Right.
not always as easy to go ahead and find somebody who's willing to go ahead and ask those tough questions, to go ahead and say, let's dig a little deeper. Let's go ahead and define the I mean, our society as a whole loves to go ahead and reward the firefighter, the person who runs in to put out the fire, but they don't go ahead and talk at all about the fire marshal who's out there who prevents the fire from ever happening.
No, I 100% agree. And I mean, that is when we look at how we assess issues throughout every organization, one person, 10 people, and through on, oftentimes when I find that when people are bringing on virtual assistants as an example, one of the things that they often default to is I can do it better myself, right? Oh, I can do it better myself. I can do it quicker myself. Like, well, let's talk about why that's the process. Why are they not doing it 80% of what Cody wants, right? And I've written a whole book about it. I'm going to publish it in about 2 months, all around the idea that getting from I can do it better myself to someone doing it good enough, which, perfect is oftentimes the, antagonist of, good enough, right? And so getting people to that process, it's challenging because it is easier sometimes to get in there and do it because you've done it before, you've seen how it's done, and you know exactly how you want it. However, you can't scale an organization that way.
No, absolutely. Well, and sometimes I think it's even more than that. Sometimes I think it's, well, there is something I'm supposed to be doing, and it's not my favorite thing, but it's really something I'm supposed to be doing. And rather than do that, I'm gonna do something that makes me feel good, whether it's moving materials, it's helping the wait staff, whatever.
Love it. I love it.
And so I'm gonna go ahead and default into that. Now, sometimes I think we need that. We need that comfortable position to let our mind, our subconscious work and come up with the answer that maybe we're searching for. Um, so we do need to kind of step away from our leadership role in some ways. But we have to go ahead and be careful as to why we're doing it, how we do it, and understand why we're doing it at this moment. And as long as we can kind of articulate that to ourselves, then we can start saying, okay, this is why I'm going to go ahead and do it. I want to understand a little bit better.
Well, I think I have a problem because never in my life have I wanted to do anything. And I think that's what they used to call lazy in the military. Don't quote me here, but I'm a serial delegator. Like I just want, like, if I'm doing something, I always ask myself, can someone reasonably do this 80% of what I want? And
Right.
if the answer is yes, yeah. And then I ask myself, if I hand it off to someone right away with some instruction, they're gonna mess up a few times, how upset's it gonna make me? If it's not that upset, I give it off to someone immediately. I let them mess it up and then I coach them to where I want them to be. And that way, I mean, that's how I'm surfing every day at 4 p.m. because I know that my team is going to work to 8 o'clock getting everything done. And
Right.
so it's painful, and I'm sure you see people like clutching onto the clipboard sometimes. Um and that comes from my experience. I think I've just made enough mistakes where it's cost me a lot of money that it's really hard to repeat those type of painful mistakes. So everything just seems smaller compared to that now.
Absolutely.
And so I just give it away. I'm like, it's okay. Like we'll fix it. They'll break it. We'll fix it. All right. It won't cost us too much money. It won't cost us too much time. And because I have an end goal in mind, I'm sure that's a challenging spot to get to.
But for those people like you that are out there who want to go ahead and delegate it, if you put another half step in there before just handing it off and saying, "Hey, go do it," they'll make some mistakes, but I mean the cost of failure will be relatively small. We can fix it. Set up the expectations, set up the process, set up the boundaries that they need, and coach them through it even before they do it the first time, so their
Most
mistakes
definitely.
are less. So they have a chance to go ahead and hit that failure or hit that success, even on the first try, because that also goes ahead and implants. I mean, remember, I don't know about you, but as a little kid, and I see my grandkids, the first time they hit a baseball, they might have swung 100 million times before that and totally missed the ball, even if it's sitting on a tee. But the first time they made contact, the joy in their face. It's the same
Yeah.
thing today with adults. Let them have that joy of being successful when they go ahead and get it right by trying to set them up appropriately.
No, definitely. Everyone, you need to, say in the sales world, you need to taste blood, right? And
Yeah.
I've said this to 1,000 people when they're coming on and wanting to hire lead generation, right? I'm like, I know what you want them to do, but we don't put virtual assistants in place as a failure because if they're y- if we don't reasonably see success as an option and they're going to go and grind away for 10 days and not get one lead, they're never going to know what success feels like. So that,
Right.
every day talking to you becomes a little bit more difficult. Man, I got to talk to Chuck today. I didn't get any leads. Man, tomorrow's going to be 10 times that, 20 times that. And
Right.
every day becomes really difficult to look you in the face and say, I didn't succeed today because I don't know what succeed feels like. It's tough.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, so Chuck, you have grandkids. So switching gears real quick, so you have grandkids. There's outside of 13 and 10, you got a whole family.
Yeah, I have 5 kids, 9 grandkids, 2 great grandkids. They're primarily in 2 geographic areas of the country, here around us in, just outside of Beaumont, Texas, and the everybody else is kind of up around the Monroe, Michigan, south of Detroit type of area. So we go back and forth quite a bit, watch sporting events, with both sets of grandkids, and really have a lot of fun, you know, getting to see them grow up too.
That's incredible. I'm going to say you don't look like you have great grandkids. You don't look old enough to have great grandkids. But so kudos to you, having the careers you had. So we talked military, lazy boy, and then now you run your own company, and then you have all this family. you know, as we're kind of going towards the back end of our conversation, I'd like to understand kind of how you've made it all work, right? You've done a lot. And having great grandkids, like 5 children, and then grandkids, and then 2 great grandkids, and then what seems to be a really healthy career. Like you don't look crazy, but it sounds like you should be.
Well, a lot of people like to talk about work-life balance. I'm like, trying to balance anything, you're gonna go ahead and create stress because it's not gonna balance. What I like to go ahead and talk about a little bit is work-life boundaries. Um, you know, there are boundaries. When I was going to college as a non-traditional student, during dinner time, I wasn't doing college stuff. I mean, I would get off work, I'd go to college for an hour or 2, I'd come home, I'd kinda do the home thing and be present at that moment, and then after the kids went to bed is when I'd go ahead and do homework. Might be up to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, but that was the time for homework. We had a I was managing a wood cutting facility at one point in time, and a tornado hit. So you can imagine the amount of work we had to go ahead and do after that to keep the production running, even though we couldn't do it at that facility. Well, at that point in time, there was no work life or there was no balance. There was no, well, I'm going to do 50-50 or 60-40. It was 18 hours a day on work. And the other hours a day was on sleep just to go ahead and recover from work. We did that 6 days a week. Now, I didn't expect that of the people who reported to me, but they were probably putting in 10 to 12 hours a day, easily 5 to 6 days a week. So we have to go ahead, just reset the boundaries and say, at this moment, at this time, because of these reasons, this is what it's going to go ahead and look like. Um, but when you don't have an emergency where you have to focus, I mean, you were a Marine, in the time of war, you're going to be 100% focused on
Mm,
doing your job. You may have a family, but you're not going to be thinking about them because you can't afford to. On the other hand, at one of the times where you're off on leave, you're going to be thinking about family, and not that you don't love the Marines, not that you're still not a Marine. That's not going to be anywhere in the front part of your brain and what you're consciously
correct.
thinking about. So we need to go ahead and just set boundaries, say, when am I going to do what? Um, and okay, if the boundaries aren't working, how do we adjust them? But it's not about, well, I need to get some sort of artificial balance in there, because at times it may be far more family, like during vacation. Other times it may be far more work during an emergency. And we have to learn to accept and embrace that.
It's a pendulum, definitely,
Absolutely.
and I explain that to my team oftentimes where, someday people always ask, like, they love the idea of asking, what are our work hours? Funny question, actually. And so telehelping's approach is always like, ideally, we're working 8 to 5, like ideally, right?
Right.
Pacific Standard Time. And so, but sometimes it's not. And when it's not, it's because we have something that we obviously need to perform and either fix and or deliver. And and I think that's a great way of putting it. Sometimes, like, you're at war, and every day's Monday, and there is no clock in, there is no clock out. It's when you wake up, you get to it, and when you finally hit a stopping point, not a finish point, a stopping point,
Right.
you go to sleep and you do it all over again. And so, and I mean, that's
Right. I mean,
a great
in
way
a
of
call
putting it.
center, a call comes in, you decide to pick up the call, and it's 2 minutes to 5. Well, realistically, it's a 20-minute call. Whatever, it takes that amount of time to go ahead and satisfy that customer, or to understand the problem. So, I mean, you just do it. I mean, now
Yeah.
you expect at some point in time, one of your leaders are going to see that, say, okay, if you need to come in late one day, or we'll flex on the other side for you. Or if you need to leave early one day, we can flex on that, because you're willing to go ahead and complete the work that needs to get completed in the time that's there, whether you're supposed to be on the clock or off the clock or whatever.
I like that. No, Chuck, I like the idea of work-life boundaries, and that's something that I'll take to. I'm doing an event next year for founders, and I'm definitely going to take that mentality, work-life boundaries, because balance. You're right. If you're chasing balance, you'll never catch it, and so you'll never catch a balance, and so
And
it's
you'll create
very,
a lot
very
of
challenging.
stress.
No, very much so. Very much. Well, Chuck, I appreciate your approach on things, and it's wonderful chatting with someone who's had careers, right, and then has also had a successful creation of a family. My goal always is to be successful today, but ideally, I just want my kids to like me in 15 years, right? It's kind of what I want. Like, a buddy of mine told me, like, the real success in life is your kids like you as adults, and so that's what I'm aiming for. And so, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, someone who's been able to balance his career, and I appreciate your time today.
I appreciate it, Cody. Thanks for having me on.
No, Chuck, be well. Thank you, sir. Thank you for watching The Faces. Entrepreneurs are people too. Please like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Spotify so you do not miss any of our content, just like today. We really appreciate you being one of our viewers, and see you soon.